Hello, everybody. Today is day 16, and we're reading from Genesis 12 through the 15th. We are returning to the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings. And a man named Abram appears. Now, this man's significant and very important. You're going to want to hang on to this because this is about 2,000 years following Adam, and Abram is going to play a very significant role from this point on to the very last pages of the Bible. God says to Abram, "Go and leave. Go to a place that I will show you." And notice that in chapter 12, verse 2 through 3, how many times that God promises that he's going to bless Abraham. And not only is he going to bless Abraham, but he says, "I'm going to bless those who bless you." And that comes all the way down to our generation. God gave no advanced details to Abraham, and he's going to going to teach him faith, going to teach him trust. He just simply said to Abram, "Go and I will show you." It's very significant for us to understand that when God gives us directions, he rarely gives us details with a blueprint. And Abram was going to have to learn step by step. With each step he took, he was going to have to trust that God would give him clarity for the next step. So Abraham goes, and yet he does not completely obey. Do you remember he said, "Go and leave your homeland"? Well, he left. He did do that, but he took with him Lot, and there he lands in Canaan. And when he gets to the place that God had promised him, there's famine. Now that would sure rock your doubt, wouldn't it? So he goes to Egypt, thinking in his own cleverness that would probably be the obvious alternative, and that ends up being another mistake, because out of Egypt he comes back and he brings with him problems that we will talk about later, that he will carry with him the rest of his life. And in fact, we're reaping the consequences and repercussions of it today. He makes bad decisions with the future consequences. But here's something I want you to see, is that Abraham built an altar. You're going to see that several times throughout the scriptures. It's something that Noah did. This is huge because it demonstrates that it's a reference point. In fact, it's in this context that the Bible says that Abram called on the name of the Lord. He'll refer back to that altar time and time again. Now, Lot and Abraham part ways because they have so many possessions and so many people that the land cannot contain them. Abraham, being the bigger man, says to Lot, "Lot, you take you go whatever way you go, I'll go the other way. I'll give you first choice." Well, Lot takes the obvious. He looks at the land. It looks fertile. It looks like a productive piece of property, and leaves Abraham the supposed leftovers. Yet God blessed over and above in Abraham's land. He takes what may seem a disadvantage, multiplies it, and by his power, he gives it as an advantage. God says, "I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to bless your descendants after you." And he says to Abram, "I'm giving you this land." Now that's important to remember that, because when God promises something, he doesn't recant it, and that promise stands to this day. Abraham struggles with God's timing. Remember, he's been promised an heir, a son. Doubts begin to fill his mind. The years begin to pass by. God would have to revisit Abraham, and he would clarify and he would reaffirm. He would give to Abram visions which would help to maybe secure that. Chapter 15, verse 6, I love this passage. Hang on to this. It's applicable to your life and my life. "And Abraham believed God, and God accounted it to Abraham for righteousness." I'll tell you, that's wonderful, because when you think your works and efforts are so important, remember something, that it is a trusting in God and obeying what he tells you to do, and from it comes incredible, obvious rewards. God reveals secrets of events that will happen hundreds of years later. In fact, 400 years, he gives insights to Abram, which there would be a people that would be bound in captivity in Egypt. And this is in reference to Moses coming along and delivering them out. So hang on to that. God's delivering power, but he gives an advance warning to Abraham that this was going to come even from his descendants. God made a covenant with Abraham. That covenant will stand. When God makes a covenant, it is irreversible. It's going to stand. He will not back down to it. He obligates himself to it. That covenant stands, and we are beneficiaries of that covenant as heirs of Abraham through the promise of Jesus Christ. What we find in this passage, believe God and believe his promises. The messianic promises are here. That is, all of this points to Jesus, to the lineage of Abraham. God's going to raise up the seed, and that will be our Redeemer through Jesus Christ. Like Abraham, you and I are to believe God. And you know what? We get credit to our account when we dare to, don't lose this. And Abraham believed God, and it was accredited to him for righteousness.